This map is very important for a lot of the questions in this homework. We can see that the arrow along the side here acts as a timeline. In the multi-regional evolution map, we can see that it shows that about 1.8 million years ago, all the human lineages split into the different continents, forming the different races. With very little interbreeding, these races never came back together again. In the Out of Africa map, it shows something very similar. About 1.8 million years ago, all of the lineages split, but then all of these previous lineages became extinct. So you can see there. Later on, approximately 100 to 150,000 years ago, about right here, the modern human lineages spread to the different continents. So the first one is suggesting a very ancient origin to the many different human populations across the globe, whereas the second one is suggesting a more recent diversification coming out of Africa. This map is also showing an estimate of divergent times, but it's turned sideways. We can see here that approximately 500,000 years ago, that the modern human lineages split off from the Neanderthal lineage. This went this way. And then we can see that 170,000 years ago, this node right here, is when the modern races that we know today diverged. This one should look familiar to you. This is just like the animal diversity phylogenetic trees, but this one depicts great apes. In this diagram, time is running in a vertical axis from ancient times at the bottom here to modern at the top. An important part of this tree that you'll want to make note of are the nodes, which we can find one here, here, here. Now, remember what a node means. It is the point at which two species diverged. The dates at the nodes indicate the scientists' approximation of when this divergent event occurred. This will help you when trying to answer questions about the multi-regional hypothesis, which showed that all modern humans branched from Homo erectus 1.8 million years ago and never came back together. This chart shows us the overall genetic difference that exists within each species, and in the case of chimpanzees, their subspecies. To figure this out, scientists compared a whole bunch of gene sequences between organisms of the same species. Now here the x-axis, shows how different each gene was in percent. And then the y-axis, this one, shows what percentage of the genes they compared that showed that many differences. So for example, if we look down at our last example, it's for gorillas, we can see that 15% over here of the genes that they compared were 15% different in their sequences between individual gorillas. Now we can also tell that some of the gorillas' genes were as much as 22% different between individuals. Now in humans, all of the genes they compared up here were less than 6% different between any two individuals. We can even see that between all the subspecies of chimpanzees, that there is more diversity between them than between any two humans. Now use this information to help you decide which hypothesis is best supported. This map is similar to the other phylogenetic trees that we have viewed, in that it has a timeline. And this timeline, it goes from left to right, and it shows the divergence times of species. The farther back that they split, the older the lineage is. So we can see here that the African lineages fall out earlier than our non-African lineages. This graph shows us a few different diseases and how prevalent they are among different races. You can see that cystic fibrosis occurs in almost every race depicted here in this graph. These maps show the prevalence of the sickle cell allele hemoglobin S around the world, and then the regions in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East where sickle cell and malaria can be found overlapping. Here in this top map, it shows the sickle cell allele is very prevalent in Africa, but we can see that it is also found in Australia, Russia, New Zealand, Europe, and other countries. In this bottom map, it shows where sickle cell and malaria overlap. We can see that in most areas, the sickle cell allele overlaps with the presence of malaria, which is our orange. There are some areas where malaria is spreading and the sickle cell allele is not prevalent, which is in yellow. Mosquitoes appear to be migrating faster than natural selection is able to select for the sickled allele. You also see a few regions where the sickle cell allele is present, but the malaria is not prevalent. This is likely a case of genetic flow or genetic drift. Here are 3 examples showing how different alleles relate to races. The least frequent occurrence is going to be found on the top, and the most frequent occurrence is going to be found on the bottom. Now, each race is represented by a different color. Let's look at the first one, which is PTC. Now, it shows that it is least common in color yellow, which is our Asian race. However, we look here and see that on the bottom, it is also most common in the yellow, which is the Asian race. This shows that there doesn't really seem to be a sorting of alleles by race. Now, the last few questions are going to ask you to make predictions of climate influence on nose and eye shapes as well as skin color. Make sure you read all of the data carefully and think about it before making your predictions. Good luck!